Hello everybody, I'm your host Too Elusive, and this time we are going to be starting a new series where we're shifting the focus from apes to hedgehogs. And there's only one hedgehog that comes to mind when we're talking about video games.
I'll be honest, I can't tell you the last time I've gone back and played the first Sonic title on the Genesis, but that's probably because it's not exactly my main go-to if I want a classic Sonic experience. But who knows, maybe after replaying the game that opinion might change, or I'll remember why I prefer the other Sonic titles of the Genesis era. Now everyone should know what Sonic is all about, but in case you haven't heard of the franchise up to this point, you're playing as a speedy blue hedgehog whose main duty is to stop Robotnik from imprisoning animals inside of aggressive robots and collecting all the Chaos Emeralds before he does. It's a very simple plot that has worked for the type of game Sonic is, and they've ran with this for the majority of the franchise. In order to understand what makes Sonic such an iconic 2D platformer at the time this game came out, you have to know what made Sonic so different from the Mario titles that this game is inspired from. Unlike Mario, Sonic's gameplay is centered around speed and platforming. When the player gains enough momentum, they'll be able to see Sonic speed through loops, run up slopes, and soar through the air so as long as the speed is maintained. This momentum-based gameplay was new and refreshing to 2D platformers during this era and created this hidden reward system that allowed players to blaze through the levels once they figure out the best method to utilize Sonic's speed. In other words, the speed aspect of it is earned with skill, and Sonic is the first of its kind to bring that to the table. The player is presented with 6 zones, each containing 3 acts that the player must clear in order to progress to the next zone. Scattered in each act, there are rings that the players can collect, which is basically Sonic's lifeline. As long as he's holding at least one of these, he won't die if he runs into a robot, spikes, or other stage hazards that can damage him. When he receives damage, the rings will scatter all over the place, and the player can recover as many as they can before they vanish. Getting crushed, drowning, and falling into a bottomless pit, however, is an instant death, and rings can't save you here. Collecting 100 of these rings will also grant you an extra life, so it's always a good idea to make sure to stack as many as you can and hope you don't get touched. Sonic can also obtain a shield that resembles a CRTV and can protect him from one hit, and he can also gain a temporary barrier of stars which makes him invincible, which is Sonic's version of the Starman from the Mario titles. The player can also come across these springs which can send Sonic flying through the air or send him running forward if they're against the wall. The power of that spring is determined by its color, red being strong and yellow having half the strength of its counterpart. The player can also defend themselves through the use of Sonic's Spinball, where Sonic curls himself up in ball form and spins rapidly to buzzsaw anyone who touches him. It's easily performed by jumping or pressing down on the D-pad when Sonic has enough running momentum. Whenever he destroys a robot, an animal is freed, and while that's the name of the game, it's not necessary to destroy every robot to clear a level. Enemies also don't respawn once they're destroyed, so that's always nice. While the player is traveling through these acts, they can also stumble upon these signposts that serves as checkpoints. Touching these bad boys will allow Sonic to respawn at the signpost in the event that he loses a life rather than starting at the very beginning of the level. When Sonic reaches the end of Act 1 and Act 2, he'll be greeted with a goalpost that'll show Sonic's award-winning mugshot. On the third act, however, he'll go toe-to-toe with Robotnik himself. Each of these boss fights requires Sonic to hit Robotnik 8 times before he goes down, then free the animals trapped in a large capsule right after. If you happen to clear Act 1 or Act 2 with 50 or more rings in hand, Sonic will be able to access a special stage, but only if the player jumps into the ring before Sonic runs off on his own. I knew the Hedgehog is impatient, but damn. So I strongly advise that you slow down when you know the goal is coming, otherwise he's gonna run off screen and you'll miss your chance of entering. Upon entry, you're sent inside of a different dimension where Sonic is constantly falling, and you'll have to guide him to where the Chaos Emerald is without hitting any of the blocks that would send you back to the main game. The special stages can be a bit janky to get through, but with enough practice they'll become easier to do. They also get progressively harder the closer you are to obtaining all 6 of the Chaos Emeralds. Yes, you heard that correctly. The first game initially started with 6 emeralds before there were 7, mainly because of how many zones the player had access to. Now I absolutely love the visuals this game provides as you're progressing through these stages. Each zone is colorful and appealing to the eye with an awesome track to go along with it. But with that being said, the game does not come without its fair share of flaws aside from the issue with entering special stages. One thing I noticed when I was playing through each zone is that some of the level designs seem to go against the core mechanic that the game was advertising itself to be, which is a combination of speed and platforming. While I'm well aware that Sonic is not always about speed, it's still a good idea to make sure that the levels can at least complement the game's core mechanics so that the speed can be experienced at certain intervals. Green Hill, Spring Yard, which is my personal favorite stage, and the Starlight Zone are perfect examples of these, as these levels contain a fine balance between the two. Marble, Labyrinth, and Scrap Brain, however, are more slower paced compared to the three that I've mentioned before. In Marble, you're riding slow-moving platforms across pools of lava and climbing up vertical shafts, all while avoiding spike traps along the way. Labyrinth is an underwater themed stage that's kind of like a maze, hence the name, and it's the only stage in the game where drowning is a thing. All I can say is, the moment you hear that dreadful song playing, you better find a bubble, otherwise...
So, how do you like my swimming?
And Scrap Brain is similar to Marble, but filled to the brim with plenty of hazards to look out for. None of these levels complement the speed mechanic that the game has built in, and as a result, it's not exactly the most favorable levels to play through, especially when you have to consider the fact that there are 3 acts you need to complete in order to get to the next zone. I wouldn't be surprised if anyone experienced burnout as a result and never finished the game for this reason, as 3 acts per zone can be pretty excessive. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but this game can get deceptively brutal. Some of the enemy placement can outright lead to a cheap death if you happen to be near a bottomless pit due to the knockback, which I can easily forgive because that is entirely my fault. Spikes, on the other hand, is where I have an issue with. Usually when you take damage, Sonic will gain a few iframes which will allow the player to correct their mistake and move on. Unfortunately, you can't do that when spikes are involved. The spikes were programmed to ignore your iframes, so even if those frames are active, Sonic will take damage regardless and will lead to a lot of frustrating deaths. There was some speculation in the community stating that this was a bug since it was removed in Sonic 2 and onward, and also it's been removed in later versions of this game. But after doing some research, I found out that the spikes were indeed programmed to be that way. Thank God they decided to change that in later installments. Another reason why this game can be pretty brutal is because if you happen to get a game over, you need to start all the way back from the very beginning of the game, going through all 3 acts per zone just to get right back to where you once were. Again, I can completely understand the burnout, and I will tell you right now that I was not above using save states when it came to playing this game for the sake of the review. Another issue I need to point out with the game is that it can sometimes be extremely easy to lose your momentum. For example, there is a slope at the very beginning of Starlight Zone that's supposed to allow you to gain momentum by spin dashing down said slope and across a small gap so you can travel up the wall, which can reach a higher platform. But for some reason that gap will take away your momentum you've gained and make it rather difficult to complete this task of getting up there. If it was any other Sonic game, this would have never happened. The last thing I need to point out here is that there have been a few times where I've experienced frame slowdown, mainly when there's too much graphical interaction going on. A lot of it took place within the Labyrinth zone, which is not surprising when you consider the water physics. Once you've defeated the final boss, you'll be given 2 different endings depending on whether or not you've gone out of your way to collect all of the Chaos Emeralds. The good ending shows just how salty the evil genius can be, whereas the other has Robotnik juggling the remaining Chaos Emeralds you didn't collect. While this is obviously there to taunt you, it wasn't really enough to motivate me into getting all the Chaos Emeralds since there isn't much reward for getting them anyway. I was content with just beating the game alone. The first Sonic game was definitely rough around the edges, but still a decent game nonetheless. I can easily say that my opinion on it hasn't changed too much over the years, as the only time I ever really come back to play the first title is if I want to run through Spring Yard again. And that's much easier to do now because of Sonic Generations version, which allows you to pick the level right from the get-go. Speaking of other versions, this game has been re-released several times with some features added depending on what platform it's released on. First, let's talk about the version on Android and iOS. I'm gonna be real honest with you and say that I wish I never played this version of the game because it makes me want to have it on consoles that much more. This game was programmed by Christian Whitehead himself, who was the same developer that gave us the more refined version of Sonic 2, CD, and also gave us Sonic Mania on top of that. And the difference in this game's performance is staggering compared to the original. First off, the game runs much smoother and is able to maintain a steady frame rate with little to no slowdown compared to the original. Second, the game's controls have been refined. Sonic moves and feels a lot better, and its momentum gain is much more consistent compared to the original. Hell, I had a much easier time completing some of the Emerald stages as a result of these improvements. Add in the fact that he's been given the ability to spin dash in place just like he could in Sonic 2, and you have a much better game on your hands. Finally, there have been a few touch-ups to the game itself to make it much more enjoyable compared to its older brother. Spikes can no longer damage you if your iframes are active, interactive, you no longer lose momentum as easily as before, allowing stages like Starlight Zone to have a much smoother flow, and the game even comes with a save file. So if you wanted to stop playing and pick up right where you left off at a different time, now you have the option to do so, an absolute godsend. Plus, it is worth noting that if you get a game over, you won't start at the very beginning of the game, but rather you'll be given the option to start right at the beginning of the act. On top of all this, you gain the ability to play as Tails and Knuckles. With all these features that have been added into the game, this is easily the definitive version that you're going to want to play. The only catch is that unfortunately it is a mobile exclusive, which I can fully understand why that would turn people off. Hell, I didn't even touch this one until the start of this review, and now I don't want to go back to playing the original game because of this. The closest we've got to an updated version of the game is the questionable re-release we've gotten on the Switch, which came out not too long ago. I say questionable because while it has some of the improvements you can find in the mobile version of the game, it doesn't have all the meat and potatoes that make it feel like it's worthy of a rebuy. Now, this version does come with some cool new features that you won't find on the mobile, such as Sonic's drop dash ability from Mania, a stage select mode where you're able to select any stage you want from the get-go, a save state function that works very similar to that of emulation, and it also comes with a new feature called Ring Keep mode. Basically, when Sonic receives damage, he doesn't lose all of his rings at once, which makes the game much easier to play. Along with that, there's an online ranking mode where you're able to upload your replay data to show off your fastest runs. So if you feel the need to flex on a particular stage that you're good at, you have the option to do so. Again, while these features are cool, it unfortunately does not come with any of the bonuses you get from playing the mobile version of the game. Sure, you have Sonic's drop spin here, but that's nothing compared to having 2 additional characters to play as and polished gameplay overall. It's because of this I can't really justify the $10 price tag that it's asking for. But if you feel you must get this game on the Switch, try your best to wait for a sale to happen.
Alright, so with all that being said, there's only one more game that I do need to talk about, and that's Sonic Genesis on the GBA. This game has received a lot of polarizing reviews compared to the other ones that I've talked about so far, and if you go to any reviewer, they'll literally tell you that this game is one that you want to avoid. But despite hearing these reviews and people talking about it and saying all these terrible things, I am a very strong advocate of play for yourself, see it for yourself, and see if everything holds up the way that it should. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and actually play through the game first before I go ahead and talk about how I feel about the game and just see if it really is as bad as people make it out to be. Besides, it can't be all that terrible, right? You know what? I say now it's the time we play a much better game. Hold up.
What the hell happened here? Why did this port turn out the way that it did? Considering the fact that the GBA's hardware is stronger than the Genesis, there is no reason why the port should have turned out the way that it did. Alright, before I get into the real meat of this game, let's take a moment to give credit where credit is due and talk about the only good features this game had, which, trust me, it's not a long list at all. It is the first Sonic port that incorporated the spin dash mechanic from Sonic 2, and it is also the first port that saved your progress. That's about it. The rest is all downhill from here. The first thing I immediately notice is how bad this game suffers from its screen resolution. When they ported this game over to the GBA, the devs didn't bother to lower the game's default resolution to accommodate for the GBA screen size. So what ends up happening is that the camera is zoomed in on the player character the whole time, making it much harder to see what's ahead of you so you can react properly. This is what is known as a screen crunch, a repeated offense that has happened in other GBA titles, mainly when they're porting an older game to the system. Lowering your vision is not the only thing the screen crunch has done, however. It has also royally screwed up the game's physics engine as a whole. Collision detection is non-existent, which is very evident in boss fights. Not only are you able to hit Robotnik much easier in this game, but you can also drill right into him since there's hardly any recoil after he takes damage, making every boss fight in this game a cakewalk. Drill! Speaking of recoil, when you take damage, it takes a longer time for Sonic to be able to recover after he's been hit. Also, the springs tend to not do anything when you touch them sometimes. Gaining momentum in this version is much more inconsistent compared to the original as well. There have been a few times where I've gained momentum where I shouldn't have and lost it at random, which confused the hell out of me. Also, the game's frame rates are absolutely atrocious. You're going to experience a lot of slowdown when playing this title, much more than you would have experienced in the original. Levels that were already slow paced become even slower, especially in Labyrinth Zone, which is where I gave up because I decided that's where I'm going to end my suffering. Finally, you have the sound quality. Everything in this game sounds horrible, and again, I don't know why they were not able to use the original sound clips. If the game's sound effects did not throw you off as much as it did for me, the ear-grating music certainly will. It was an absolute crime when they butchered my favorite track in the entire game. But listening to Labyrinth's theme is downright ear-grating.
What Nintendo?
Listen, do yourselves a favor and don't even bother playing this one. Literally any port of this game, including the original, is much better by comparison, even if they don't include the spin dash from Sonic 2.
Well, there you have it, guys. If there's anything that I can say about Sonic 1 when it comes to playing this title, the best way to experience this game is by playing pretty much every other version of the game with the exception of the original and the Genesis version on the GBA. Mainly because every other port of this game has refined the controls as well as the overall experience that you can get out of it compared to how it was back when it was originally released on the Genesis as well as the GBA version. Granted, the GBA version may have got the leg up on starting the whole save your progress thing and having the spin dash, but it really doesn't mean anything if the game plays like absolute crap, so. But with that all said and done, next time we get back in here, we're going to be talking about Sonic 2 for the Genesis. So until then, guys, play until your thumbs fall off, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everybody. I say now it's the time we play a much better game. And that's Crash Bandicoot.